Alright, welcome back to Central Ontario. About -2, -3 degrees Celsius today. It's getting a little chilly. We're into December now. Had a little snow yesterday. And the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. Which means that what I've been finding is, of course, by the time I get around to working on the tractor, it's pitch dark outside. You'll recall I picked up this magnetic work light a couple of weeks back. Thought it was going to be a strong magnet, wasn't really happy with it, so I had to throw in a temporary solution where I just tie wrapped it to the ROPS and ran the 12-volt plug down so I could use it when I needed to. Not too bad. It's only about 400 lumens, and at night I'm noticing, although it'll light up the forest and the driveway around me, it's not giving me a lot of light. Plus it's a floodlight, so the light is dispersed in a wide pattern as opposed to focused in front of the tractor. And of course I have no rear lighting. So gave it a little bit of thought over the last few weeks, took a look at different things, read through the manual again to try to see if I could get some hints, and was pleased to find that there's actually pre-wired work light leads from the fuse box to the back of the tractor underneath this back fender. So I went to my auto supply place, worked out a little plan, so I think I've got a good plan to put in some new lights, both front and rear, which will help me at night, being that I have a feeling I'm going to be spending a lot of my time in the dark when I'm working out here through the winter months. This light, as I said, is about 400 lumens. Picked up some nice lights, picked up a couple of these. These are 1260 lumens each. And the nice thing about this is the middle lights are actually spotlights, so they intensify light directly ahead of it. And the outside lights are more flood pattern. So it'll give me a little bit of light along the sides of the driveway into the forest. And what I'm going to do is put one up facing frontwards and one on the back. I'm going to install a couple of switches so I can control them and put them on when I want them. And very fortunate, we can't make any alterations to the ROPS. I guess it's against the law. The dealership told me you can't drill holes in it or do things. So I've noticed some folks use U-bolts to put work lights on. There's a tiny little hole in the top of the ROPS. And what I plan to do is I plan on fishing a wire through the ROPS to keep it hidden, bring it back down, out the bottom of the ROPS, and then bring it up under the fender to meet the leads for the power from the fuse box, as well as to run wires to put my switches in. So it's going to be a long day. I'll try to make it as interesting as I can, but I'd like to show you every step of the way so that you see how I've done it. A little disclaimer, I'm not an electrician, just sort of a handyman, so I'm just going to let you know that. But come along with me. Hopefully you'll find it informational, and at the end of the day, hopefully the lights will work. All right, thanks. Okay, so first things first, let me just take you through the manual so you can see where it was that I kind of pieced this all together. Manuals doesn't have a lot of info when it comes to schematics or the wiring, but what I was able to find, I was trying to think of what I wanted to do with these lights, so I read back through the manual over a coffee, and I noticed I missed it the first few times I went through this manual, but when you get to page 29, you'll see that there's a couple of pictures under electrical outlet. There's no other write-up or any other information anywhere, because you're immediately going to the PTO page after that. But what you see here is you've got two pictures, and we've got a 12-volt, which we know, we can see that. And I didn't know what this picture was of, but in little letters here you'll see there's an electrical outlet for work light, 12-volt DC with 35-watt maximum. And when I looked at the picture, I didn't even realize that was there, and it appears to have a second outlet. So we have a 12-volt outlet and a second outlet. And I thought, well, geez, that's odd. I didn't even realize it was there. So went and took a look, and there's no outlet under there, under that fender. But what there is there's two bullet connections, positive and a negative, it appears, one female, one male. And as I went through the book a little bit further and got through into the maintenance section, I noticed that on page 71, it gives you a picture of what the fuse panel looks like under the hood. And if you look, your flashers are there, solenoid for the in the engine, outlet, which is your 12-volt outlet, I believe, headlights, and work light, 5-amp fuse for a work light. And so I took a look. Sure enough, there it is, work light again. And I figured, well, maybe I better check that out. And you'll see when I get back out there, what I did find, of course, is that there is no connection for a work light under there, or there's no, outlet for it, but there are two bullet connectors. So I think we can use the bullet connectors, run the wire through, run them to a switch or two switches for the lights, and run them up through the ROPS. So that's what I think we're going to do. Let's get at it. All right, so just so you know where you are, you're under the right back fender of the tractor. As you can see here, just as it said in the directions, you've got your wiring for your brake light as well as your hazard light. And sure enough, right here, and I'll throw a little light on this so you can see it. All right, hopefully this guy will stay for me. Right here you'll see there are two leads, two bullet leads, coming off of this wiring harness, one female, one male, wrapped in blue tape. There is no outlet anywhere that I can see that's, you know, an outlet per se, but we've got these two leads. So what I wanted to do with these two leads is see what I could do as far as just testing them. So I'm just going to throw a little light back here so I can see what I'm doing. And let me just see if there's any voltage off of those leads right now. Got my multimeter, and of course my glasses. Alright, so I got it set on DC volts. In theory, I can only assume that the female must be the positive and the male must be the negative, and I've got nothing on that, so that means it's probably that fuse that we saw underneath, or I'll show you in a minute, is underneath the hood. Let me just throw on the accessories so I can throw a little power to it, and let's test it again. And yep, there we go. Got 12 volts on those leads. Okay. So I don't know if you need to see it or not, but there's your multimeter. Get them under there. Okay, and we're going to throw a lead on there. And one on the negative. And there's your 12 volts coming up. Okay, so that's a good sign. So we've got power, we've got two leads. Let's take a look under the hood, and I'll show you the fuse panel. Okay, coming around the other side of the tractor here. Let's just pop open the hood. Okay, and for those of you that haven't ventured into your fuse panel yet, it's over here on the left-hand side of the engine, and it's just this tiny little box here. Okay, and if you take a look in here, just pop her open, you'll see right on the front it says work lights 5 amps, and sure enough, there she is right there. And for those of you that didn't know, because I didn't know, these are actually mini fuses. I assumed that they were just regular automotive fuses, so definitely going to have to pick myself up some spares next time I head off to the automotive supply place. So I'm pretty sure, based on what I read in there, that that fuse fuses back to the two bullet connectors behind the rear right fender. So that's what we're going to use to hook up our lights, and we're going to get at it. Okay, so just to get you up, I've got my bullet connectors, I'm ready to go. I think the first thing I want to do is just fish my raw wire out and get them in place. And as I said, I'm going to fish it through that little hole. Hopefully it'll fit. It looks like the wiring on this wire harness is about 18 gauge. I don't think it's 16. It looks a little smaller. So what I did is I've got two work lights. I want to switch them separately so I can turn the back and the front on separately or together. So what I did is I picked up a small spool of 18 gauge 4 conductor wire. It's pretty small. Hopefully I should be able to get it fished through that hole, no problem. I'm going to bring her down the rofts, take it out the bottom of the rofts. Got to be careful though, because that of course is down at the bottom of the lower arm of the 3-point hitch. And then I'm going to run my raw wire. I'm going to mount my switches down on the panel just in front of the 2-wheel forward-wheel drive lever, because there's lots of room under there for me to mount the wiring underneath and the connections. And I've also picked up a little bit of the protector, plastic wire protector, because I want to make sure the wire is protected as I run it, especially underneath the tractor. So it's the same similar stuff that the tractor harness is wrapped in. That should help it out. And I got my fish wire, and hopefully we can fish it successfully, because I don't like, you know, wires exposed, you know, the way it is right now temporarily. So let's remove it and let's get to work. Light will still going to come come in handy. I'll probably just leave it in my toolbox and use it whenever I need it. Okay, she's run through. Take a look on the other side, see if she's come through okay. Okay, so quick check-in. Bottom of my fish has come down through the bottom of the ROPS pipe, and as I mentioned, it's a little close to the lower arm on the 3-point, but what I'm going to do is bring it through the back, because this is a pretty wide thing, and bring it up and tie wrap it up through here. So what I've done, just so you guys know, I peeled back the 4 wires because they were pretty flat, and I wanted to make them a little more round so they'd be a little easier to get through the hole. Tied them onto the bottom of my fish tape, and I'm going to drag it back up through to the top of the ROPS and bring it through. So you can see I dropped the ROPS down, pulled the wires through. It was a little bit tight getting it through because that hole is actually very small, but I was able to get them through, and I've checked and none of my wires are chafed. None of the insulation is chafed off, and I think I have more than enough here that I can wire up the 2 lights with a little bit of spare. Also put some tape around where it enters the hole. I think that's always handy because you never know if it's going to, over time, rattle and eventually start chafing the insulation. Also had to make sure I twisted them. I had to pull them apart, twist them into a really tight circle, and then tape them, and got them through no problem. You'll see that I'll just lower you a little bit here so you can see. The wire is coming up down through the bottom of the ROPS. Hopefully you folks can see that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my plastic protection on here, bring it up, draw it up underneath the fender or along the fender, and I'm going to tie wrap it to the existing wire harness all the way through until to the front of the tractor fender where I want to put my switches. Okay. All right, welcome back. Just a quick check-in. Just right now, I've just spun my wires, and I'm just putting the plastic protector on top of it. I've already lengthened it out to see how much I need to get to the front of the fender, and right now I'm just, putting the protection around the wires before I tie wrap them through and get them all done. All right, back again. So what I've done is, as I mentioned, I put the plastic protection on these wires, and what I did is I pulled the wire down through the ROPS so that I could get 4 or 6 inches of it up into the bottom of the ROPS, and I've of course pulled about 6 inches of slack up through the middle of the ROPS, so I've got some slack inside the ROPS in case you need it later for splicing or doing anything, and at least making sure we've got a lot of extra. And what I'm going to do now, as I said, is because I've had to come out the bottom where the ROPS comes out close to the 3-point hitch, is I'm going to take it around the back, tie wrap it through the back away from any of the moving parts, and make sure that I follow it up the ROPS and back to the wiring harness that's already existing. And then I'm going to tie wrap it through to the front after I cut another piece that's going to bring my power feed cables back to these 2 bullet connectors that are sitting under the fender. Then I'm going to tie wrap them all together so that I've got my power extended out to where my switches are going to be installed, as well as I've got the run right out to where the lights are going to be installed. Okay, quick update. So as I discussed, hopefully you can see under there. You'll see the wire. It comes up underneath the ROPS, and then you'll see that I've tie wrapped it through and around on the back side of the ROPS, and then I've followed, if you can see, the existing wire harness is out to the front of the fender, and I brought back a power cord, which I plan on throwing some bullet connectors on, shrink wrapping the ends of them, and then I'm going to tie them in. Fortunately, I've got 4 conductors and I've got 2 switches, so what I'll do is simply connect, probably I guess the green and the brown as positives and the yellow and the white as negatives together into the same bullet connector, and then connect them up. And if you take a look back over here, this is where I plan on mounting the 2 switches, here and here, just because there's a ton of room underneath here, and it's an empty space, and there's definitely no room. I took a look underneath, and there's very little room to try to pull wires to try to put switches in here, and I'm not that good at it, so I thought maybe it'd be best if I just drilled the holes in and put them here. And there's my power lead, and here's my feed up to the ROPS to where the lights will go. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to grab my bullet connectors, get them put on, throw some shrink wrap on them, shrink them, and then we'll start connecting power and then get the lights going. Okay, so what I've done is I've twisted my negatives together and my positives, so I've got them in parallel running out.
Connected my bullet connectors, shrink wrapped them just to give them a little bit of extra weatherproofing. And what I'm going to do now is just get these guys put together. I'll tape them up and then get this a little more secure with tie wraps to the side of the ROPS because they've been hanging down here for a bit. Okay, all the wiring harness is in. Wire strapped to the end of the ROPS there. You can see I've done my connections and also followed the wire through. It looks like I left a lot of slack because there's a lot of loops as you can see with the normal wiring, and I assume that's because they like to leave lots of slack in the wire that they run. Okay, and we've come out to the front. Got my 2 leads here. As I said, I'm going to mount my switches, both of them here, because it's pretty empty under there and there's nothing in the way. The metal for all of the handles and the shifts are all back here, so I think I'm pretty safe. Picked up myself just 2 little switches there, just 1 position or 2 position switches. Got a little LED on it so I can tell when they're on. And what I'm going to do is drill my holes into the surface and then try to just make sure that they're the right size, then pull my wires through, make my connections, and then I can get on to the lights on the ROPS. The package didn't tell me exactly how big this is. I tried to measure it, but I think I'm going to go a little old school with this. Use the old style hole driller here manually, just so I can make sure that the hole is not too big so that the switch isn't loose, and then I'll file it out as I need to as I go. Alright, see you in a minute. Okay, holes are drilled, and of course I had to just maybe wind them out a little bit with a file. And also there's a notch, you'll notice usually in these, that helps that you've got to notch the hole so that you're able to, so that the switch will not flip around too much. So that's been done. They're all filed. I tested them. I think they're the right size. I'm pretty sure they are for sure. So I think we're in good shape. So we're going to bring our wires through. We're going to throw our spade connectors on the end of our wires and then shrink wrap them a bit and then connect them up to the switches. And then before I start mounting the lights, I think I'm going to just do a quick test to make sure the voltage is flowing through and everything before I snap these switches into place, because I think once I stick them in there I'm going to have a hard time getting them out. Alright, see you in a minute. Okay, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Got the switches are all done. As you saw, I tested it. Make sure that I've got power through to the switches, which I do. And before I actually set the switches back in, because I have a feeling once I jam those hinges in, it's going to be hard to get them out afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the lights. Make sure that once I get the lights done, power works, everything's good. Then I'll recess my switches in, because hopefully I will never need to pull them out again. Okay, we'll catch you on the back on the ROPS. Okay, everything's all hooked up from the fuse panel through to the bullet connectors under the fender, up through my wire's been pulled through, and I'm ready to mount my lights. Thought about how I wanted to mount the lights, and I decided I'm going to put them on the underside of the ROPS, because I got a lot of forest here, and when I go through, of course, branches are hitting the ROPS, and I thought if I put them on the front or on the top, they're going to be exposed to the branches or obstacles hitting the ROPS. So I'm going to mount them underneath. Going to have one facing forward, one facing back. Thought about different ways of mounting it. I've seen some people use U-brackets and those kind of things. I want to be a little less intrusive on my ROPS, so I'm going to give this a whirl. We'll see if it works, but basically I've got little magnets which I'm going to attach to the back bracket of the lights so that it gives it a little bit of hold. And then I'm going to give these industrial Velcro straps a try. They're 18 inches. I'm going to wrap them around tight, see if that holds well. If it doesn't, I also picked up a couple of cheap, hose clamps. They're like, 99 cents. But the nice steel bracket, I can always, tighten a hose clamp down around it. So we're going to throw some connectors on here, get this thing ready to go, and we're going to mount the lights. And that way, at least I know with the Velcro straps, if they do hold, which they should because they're pretty strong, then that way I've always got the ability to move these around, change them, put different lights in, and I've got nothing too permanent and nothing that's going to scratch or dig into the ROPS and make it rust. So that's going to be the plan. Let's give it a shot. Okay, those are connected in, so before we finish up anymore, let's test to see if the switches actually work. Okay, fingers crossed. Here we go. Okay, this should be the rear-facing light. Oh, there we go. And this should be the front-facing light. Well, there you have it. They're working. Okay, so that's good news. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out how I want to play with this to make these wires look a little bit nicer, and I'm just going to throw a little bit of protector on there just on the connections as well as a little black tape because I think that'll be helpful. And then we'll get back at it. It's going to get dark here soon, and as soon as it does, I'm going to take them up the driveway through the forest and test out the lights for us. All right, thanks for sticking with me. I hope you learned something, or I hope at least it was enjoyable. I'll talk to you in a little bit. Okay, well, here we go. We're all done for the most part. Here's the finished product. Not really happy with the wiring. I've got to clean that up, but as you can see outside, it's getting a little dark. So dusk is falling, and we've got it all finished up. I checked out, as I mentioned to you, I used the Velcro strap. They just didn't tighten it up enough. Like, they held them tight, but they were a little wobbly. So I'm going to try to think of something else to use. I really don't want to do anything with like U-joints, but the lights look pretty good. Other than cleaning up the wiring a bit, I think I'm probably just going to get some wider protector and wrap those wires in that just so they're a little nicer. And there's the finished product for my switches. They came out looking really nice. They're very flush mounted. They work great. It's going to turn on the accessories. So there's the switch, on and off. Turn them on, and there's what the lights are looking like, as well as the back. Let me just take a quick look there. There we go. So otherwise, I've got a lot of stuff to clean up, and then I'm going to take it for a boot up the driveway in the dark and see how bright those lights really are and how well the spotlights work. So we'll shut her off for now. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in a few minutes when it gets dark. Okay, dusk is upon us. It's just about going to be nightfall, so I thought I'd take the tractor out. Let's test out these lights down the driveway through the forest and see how bright they are. If you remember, the magnetic light I bought was about 400 lumens, and these guys here are supposed to be 1260 lumens each, so hopefully they're going to give me a lot more power. Got them all lined up. Everything worked out really well with the switches. Took a lot of work. It was an afternoon's work, but I'm really happy I got her done. Not real happy about the wiring here, but I'm going to try to think about how I want to play with that and see if I can clean it up a little bit. But at least I got the wire through. Didn't like the Velcro, so I threw on some tie wraps, some industrial tie wraps, just to hold them up there for now. I think I probably want to do something else, but at least it's nice and clean. I don't have wires all over the sides of the ROPS or across. And I think it came out pretty clean. I got her all wired up underneath, so let's take her out for a run and see how it looks in the dark. All right. Okay, we're out just in a part of the driveway here. It's not totally dark yet, but it's pretty close to dark. And I just wanted to test out these lights. So this is the view with my normal headlights. And let's turn on our handy dandy new lights. Oh, that works. 1200 lumens, that's really sharp. And you'll see that I've got a direct light out, but I can also see the sides of the forest, which is very helpful. And if we turn, obviously there's not much to see in the back, it's a little dark out there, but I put it on the second light. And I've got it turned down right now because I really just want to see what's directly behind me. But I think that lights up really nice. So I'm really pleased with that. Got to work on my cleaning up the wiring a bit on the top of the ROPS, but I am really pleased. Alright, so it's late at night now. I just wanted to give this one last test in the pitch dark, just so we can see how well the lights hold up. So we're going to test out the front lights. Take a look without lights and with lights. Not bad for such a little unit. I think I like it a lot. It really lights up and I can see much further down the street. And in the rear, yeah, I think it was a good purchase. Pretty happy with it. Pretty happy with the installation, except for the lighting up at the top and the wiring. But I am pretty pleased overall. It was a good afternoon, well spent. And these little wee lights really shine nice. And I'm really pleased with the installation of the light switches. They really they look nice. They're flush mount. They fit in really nice, and the holes are just the perfect size. So I was pleased with how that all went in. Anyways, thanks again for sticking with me and hanging out with me this afternoon. Hope it was informational, and we'll see you again next time. All the best.